I'm here with Casey Fiesler, who is an assistant professor and a founding faculty member in the Department of Information Science, as well as computer science by courtesy at the University of Colorado Boulder. So Casey, you have a very unusual path into computing because you also have a law degree. Can you tell us how you came to computing and what was the spark that made you know that you wanted to be involved in computing?
Yeah, actually, this goes all the way back to my undergrad. So I did my undergrad degree at Georgia Tech in the early 2000s, and everyone at the entire university had to take an intro programming class. And I actually really loved it. Like, I found it really fun. And the punchline of this is that it was taught in Scheme. So this was like before Mark Gustile like overhauled everything. But I really liked it. So I took a second computer science class, and I was a psychology major. And so I actually thought about double majoring in computer science, and then realized that because of the lack of overlap between the two majors, it actually would have taken me longer to do that than to just get a master's degree. So I did a master's degree in human-computer interaction. And so that's how I got into computing. And then I went to law school in part because I was really fascinated by like internet law and technology policy. And at the time I thought that I wanted to be a lawyer and do that kind of work. And then partway through law school, I was like, no, what I really miss is being a researcher. And so I came back and did my PhD in human-centered computing.
Okay, that's great. So you recently started making YouTube videos and TikTok posts for those who are interested in pursuing a PhD. Can you tell us how you decided on that project and how it's been received and who you think the target audience might be?
Yeah, so, I got the inspiration in part because I have a really good friend who's a young adult author, and she has a YouTube channel, I mean, with like, gosh, probably almost 100,000 subscribers, where she gives advice to aspiring authors. And I was talking to her about her channel, and she's like, I just love giving advice to people and like knowing that I can help them and like telling people what to do. And so, and I was like, that's kind of how I feel about grad students. Like, I actually really like giving advice and helping people and that kind of thing. And so, and then also it was a pandemic, and I just like missed doing that in person, like I was sad that I wasn't going to get to meet in person, like our new PhD students and all that. And so that's why I decided to start the channel. And then I've actually been in charge of PhD admissions in our department since I started this job. So I've like led PhD admissions for 5 years. And, that's a thing that I feel like I have a lot of, I guess, wisdom about. And I also am I'm struck by how if students don't have the right kind of mentorship, they just don't know the things that you're supposed to do. Like mention specific faculty in your statement of purpose, and even consider reaching out to them ahead of time, and like here's who you should ask for letters of recommendation from, and these kinds of things. And I feel like if you're lucky enough to like have that kind of mentorship, you just have such a leg up over people who don't. And so that was kind of the purpose of the YouTube channel, was to like give this advice to people who might not have it otherwise. And then, and it was going really well. And I think I have, probably, I don't know, maybe 20,000 views over the course of a few months or whatever. But then I looked at my analytics and saw that most of the audience for the YouTube videos, based on however YouTube labels this, was men, which just surprised me a little bit. And I'm not completely sure why that is. I mean, I might have some theories, but I was talking about this on Twitter, and someone suggested, well, why don't you try TikTok? Because there's more women there. And I was really skeptical, but I was like, well, I'll just try it. Like, I'll make a couple of videos and see what happens. And then, I don't know how the TikTok algorithm works, but like way more organic reach than YouTube. And like the third thing that I posted got like 60,000 views overnight. And so many people commenting and like asking me questions and asking for advice and this kind of thing. And then I just got access to analytics recently, and it's like 70% women. I've noticed a really good sort of like women in STEM positivity kind of thing on places on TikTok where people care about that, right? Like one of the things I had seen show up on like Twitter, like sort of come off of TikTok and go viral, was this a woman developer who did a like point of view video where like you are a male ally that she's talking to at a tech conference. And it was really going around sort of showcasing how people, say they're allies, but aren't really. And so I've noticed a lot of that kind of humor. There's also a really great TikTok user who's, I think she might be like I think she works maybe with like college advising or something like that for STEM majors. And she does all these great videos, like encouraging people to be interested in STEM and that sort of thing. So it's kind of nice and positive, at least in my corner.
All right. So what role do you think social media should play in academia?
So I'm a big fan of like public scholarship in general. And I think that social media is a really nice way to communicate research outside of academia. So I think Twitter is particularly good for this, in part because academics are very active on Twitter, and it can be very useful for networking and that kind of thing as well. But also like, academic Twitter intersects with like activist Twitter, and especially journalist Twitter. Like Twitter is where journalists are most active. And so actually like talking about your research on Twitter can be one of those ways where like it sometimes can get amplified, sometimes journalists see it. Sometimes it'll move out of academic circles, to more of a public audience, which I think is really important for communicating research. And the other thing for social media is that, especially right now, and I think especially for grad students, like it's really useful to have a like social circle of other grad students and people in your discipline outside of just your university. And so sometimes Facebook and Twitter and Discord and these kinds of spaces can be a really good place to like connect with other people who can be a support system.
So I completely agree. So while social media has its downsides, it can also be beneficial sometimes.
That's a great point as well. And so I actually just co-organized a workshop at CCW on public scholarship. And one of the things we talked about was like, also you can get backlash sometimes, and especially as a woman researcher, harassment and these kinds of things. And so we also talked about like ways to protect yourself. There's a really nice report from Data and Society about like how researchers can protect themselves from harassment. And so I think that that's kind of important as well. And of course, it's a decision that people need to make on their own. I've been pretty fortunate. I actually, like, knock on wood, have not had as much problem with that as one might have thought.
Well, I'm glad. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your research in your lab and what you're up to currently?
Yeah. So my lab is called the Internet Rules Lab, IRL, which I thought about for a really long time. I describe the work in my lab as being about like making technology more awesome. So like, highlighting positive uses of the internet and technology. And also I do a lot of work on ethics. So like ethical research and ethical technology design and that kind of thing, including ethics education. Like how do we help teach computer scientists about how to be responsible in the technologies that they're creating. And that's actually a huge part of my research right now. My sort of soapbox for that is that I think that ethics and justice and responsibility should be integrated throughout the entire computer science curriculum, like every single class, instead of a single ethics class, even if required, because I think it's really important to emphasize that like thinking about the ethics of what you're doing is a fundamental part of being a good computer scientist in every single thing that you do.
So what piece of advice would you give to someone like maybe a girl who's currently in high school who might be interested in computing and ethics?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, so obviously if you're interested in this area and you also like, really love like computers in general and maybe want to try being a computer science major, like there is definitely a path, through computer science where, thinking about socially responsible computing and computing for social good and these kinds of things is like a lot of what you can do. Or even, so much work now on like algorithmic fairness and, computational ways of fighting bias. Like this is a hugely important area, AI, ethics. And, but also for people who are interested in this area, but maybe don't necessarily want to be the ones building technology, there's also paths through related fields like information science or even, media studies or communication or even philosophy, like applied ethics for technology is definitely something that philosophers do as well. So, it's just it's a matter of like what kind of thing you want to take on it. Though the other thing that I would add is like another thing that I think is really great about even just a little bit of computing education for everyone is that the more you understand about how technology works, even if you're not like building it yourself, but like knowing a little bit of code so that you know how it works, that makes it so much easier for you to critique it. And so I actually think that like more fundamental computing education helps us create like people who can be more critical about the ethics of technology as well.
And what advice do you give to your students to help them be successful?
Oh, so I've been thinking a lot lately about like imposter syndrome. I mean, I think about this a lot because I think it's just such a pervasive problem. And, and it's not even just PhD students, like, undergrads have this issue as well. I mean, I've heard from so many students, I like information science, like the classes that I took, and I'm thinking of switching into that major, but I'm just not smart enough for, a science. And I really hate hearing that. Like, it's one thing if you don't want to do STEM, but it's totally another thing if you like think that you can't. And I worry about this in particular for like women because, at least anecdotally, I hear things like, oh, I took this one class and I didn't do well, so I'm not cut out for the field. I hear that so much more from women than I do from men. So I really try to encourage students to like, believe in themselves, like to not compare themselves to others, like to decide what a benchmark for success for them might look like as opposed to for other people. And that there's lots of different kinds of success and that, and also lots of different kinds of expertise. So, even if you don't do well in a math class, like you might be, the best like user experience designer in this class, or that kind of thing. Like, everyone is good at something and you need to figure out what that is. And for PhD students, I really like to remind them that like everyone fails constantly. Like it's just sort of part of it's just how things are. And, you pick yourself up. And it's so easy to focus on failures because often they come at a quicker rate than successes. And so I like to encourage people to like remember what success feels like and like focus on that as opposed to, thinking, overthinking about yet another paper rejection. And also remembering that like whoever you think is like the luminary, like the most amazing person in your field, they are constantly getting papers rejected. And you're just not hearing about it because we don't talk about it on Twitter, right? Like we have this inflated sense of the proportion of successes to failures because people talk about their successes more than their failures. And so I just think that, you know, I think that's a good thing to remember, is that like this is just all part of it. Like you fail so that you can succeed more, because it'll be a better paper in the end.
Thank you very much for your time, Casey. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome.